We have different dialects, not different languages. The language is Italian. Every single region has a different dialect.
Actually, they are entirely separate languages, not just dialects of one language. Hi, my name's Woody. I'm a linguist. I'm not here to argue, but to educate. Now, when we talk about the languages in Italy, it can be a bit confusing because the Italian government does refer to those different languages as dialetti or dialects. And there is a standard Italian language, the language that you're learning when you click on Italian on a language app. It is spoken across Italy as the lingua franca, and of course that has different dialects. But when we talk about these Italian dialetti, despite their name, they are actually different languages. And to say that these languages don't exist or that they're all just different types of the same Italian language can be very dismissive of their unique histories and the cultures they represent, especially because that standard Italian lingua franca has been used to basically oppress people who don't speak it. If you've seen more of my videos, you might know that I've often said there is no real difference between a dialect and a language. In fact, I have a whole playlist dedicated to it, and I wrote my master's thesis on this concept. But I also say, since we have that concept of languages and dialects, it's important to recognize things as languages sooner rather than later, because it does a lot in recognizing the culture they represent and not dismissing them as being some substandard of a greater language. It is true that all these Italian languages exist on what we call a continuum. So maybe speakers of one can understand two, two can understand three, three can understand four, but four can't understand one. So where do you draw that line where it becomes a new language? Maybe by that logic, you want to consider everything within the same continuum to be the same language. And sure, that's a possibility. But if you're going to do that with all the different Italian languages, you might want to extend that and also say that Italian and Spanish are the same language. For example, the other day I met an Italian. We had like a 15-minute fluent conversation where he was speaking to me in Italian, even though the only Italian words that I know are pizza and pasta. Sure, there were 3 or 4 sentences that I had a bit of trouble understanding, but there are 3 or 4 sentences in a 15-minute conversation that I would have trouble understanding from most Spanish speakers. And even if I was a native speaker, there are lots of native speakers who have trouble understanding sentences in a 15-minute conversation with Chileans or Caribbeans. So if I, as a second language speaker of Spanish, could understand this man speaking standard Italian, but all the people around Italy can't understand their respective languages or dialetti, how could you consider those all the same language but still be comfortable saying Spanish and Italian are different? What you consider to be dialects versus languages is entirely dependent on your political and social views, and you clearly have a very unifying view of Italian. You want everybody to feel this unified Italian identity, and I think that's great, but you also shouldn't do it at the cost of dismissing all the unique histories and cultures and languages of the different parts of Italy. What you're looking to do is kind of like what they do in China. The government considers all those different languages to be dialects of the same language, with Mandarin being the standard. But in reality, Mandarin, Cantonese, Wu, Shanghainese, Fujianese are all very different from each other, just like those Italian dialetti. As linguists, we would consider those to be independent languages. To consider them all the same is just based on a political ideology. So if you want to follow that kind of Chinese ideology, I think that's fine, but then you'd have to recognize that there are other Romance languages that are just as, if not more similar to standard Italian than all those different Italian dialetti. And as things stand, linguists today generally recognize them all as independent languages.